If you don't understand anything else about computers, this is the thing you need to understand. Hey everyone, Andrew Stormer here, and welcome back to another computer tutorial where I teach you everything you need to know about how to spec your own gaming or YouTube video editing build. Now today, we're actually not talking specs of anything. We're talking how everything connects. How do all the pieces of a computer connect with each other? Now, we're not talking every single piece. We're talking how data goes from data to being processed. We're understanding how everything connects and what pieces it takes to get from point A to point B. So I drew up a little diagram here. So over here, we have the hard drive. And this is where it all starts. You have certain data on your disk or SSD, whatever it is. The hard drive has a cache, as we talked last week, link up there. It pulls data from the drive, from the disk. It pulls information and it puts it on the hard drive's cache because the computer thinks it's gonna use it. And then, from there, if the computer really thinks it might need to process it soon, it throws it in the RAM. And the RAM, the caches and memory of all of them, they're all temporary, where data is permanent. It's there for good. It stays here until the CPU requests it because it's going to process this data very soon. And that's what these caches are for. In my CPU tutorial, link up there as well, just go watch the rest of the videos I've done on it if you haven't seen the other videos on this stuff. One of the things I talked about in that video was the different caches. Before something can get processed, it has to be in one of the caches. Information that's going to be processed has to go from the memory to the L3 cache. And the L3 cache is the biggest cache there is. And as you can see here, if we zoom in here, you have the L3, the L2, and the L1. Something's going to be processed. It needs to get the data from somewhere. If the CPU thinks that it's going to process something right away, it's going to be sent from the RAM to one of these caches, and hopefully L1 if it thinks it's going to process it right away. Working backwards, if the processor needs something to be processed, first it looks in the L1. If it can't find what it needs to process in the L1, that's called a miss, and then it moves on to L2. If it can't find it in L2, it moves on to L3. If it can't find it in L3, it's going to search the RAM. And that right there, that's a big difference. That's going to cause a bunch of lag. And then if it can't find it in the memory, in the RAM, it's going to look in the hard drive for it. And that is obviously going to take forever because we know how slow hard drives can be at some times. They can be pretty slow at finding things. That's how it gets from point A to point B. Now, you probably noticed down here, Optane. Optane is Intel's thing, and it fits right in here. If you have Optane, it's gonna be this fourth step in here. So, stuff in the cache of a CPU and stuff in the RAM, when a computer shuts down or loses power, it's going to lose all the information in both these places. And that's because it's not a permanent data center, like a hard drive is, where if your power shuts down and you have stuff here, it'll still be there, it'll be fine. But Optane is this happy medium. It's like a permanent piece of RAM. It's like a permanent cache. What Optane does is it takes information that's frequently used from your hard drive, like let's say your operating system or your video editor or game that you play all the time. It can store it in here permanently, so then when you boot it up the next time, it's right there. because it doesn't have to go find it in the hard drive. It just looks in Optane and it's already right there. It already knows where the information is. So when you boot up that program, it just goes right here, and then it throws it all in the RAM and then into the caches to be processed. And if your computer loses power, everything that's in your Optane memory is still there, unlike RAM. It's still gonna be there, but it's also gonna be there for quick access. It can bypass the hard drive. It's like this RAM hard drive hybrid, almost. That's the basics of how computer data worked, and when I figured this out, this made computers make so much more sense to me. Why you have a CPU, why you have caches in a CPU, why you have RAM, why you have a hard drive and a hard drive cache. And it makes sense because it's this system of how data goes from one place to another and permanent to being processed and all that stuff. I hope this helps you understand computers so much more like it did me when I figured this process out. That's gonna do it for this one, so thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.